Thank you, Jan. Camille, I can imagine that a lot of things are happening in Brussels as well. Can you elaborate a bit more concretely on which projects you are driving to move SMEs forward?
Well, yes. So the Brussels Chamber of Commerce is focusing on different types of initiatives to help SMEs in that regard. I would say there's two types of initiatives really, and the first type is a more general set of initiatives where the Brussels Chamber is acting as a sort of facilitator to help the companies paving their way through existing tools and services for CO2 emission reductions, and so one of those services that we provide is the environmental. I wouldn't call it an audit because it's not. Mm-hmm. It's sort of an environmental diagnosis for startups and SMEs, but also like the retail sector and restaurants and commerces in Brussels, really like small actors, to give them an idea of what can be done in a first step to reduce their carbon footprint, the carbon footprint of their building. So it's very quite low level, and it's really focused more on like the low-hanging fruits and the quick wins they can set up in the first place. And it's not necessarily only focused on energy efficiency. It can also be focused on their waste management, so the prevention of waste, the reduction of waste, on the supply chain, on the mobility of their employees, and then of course also on energy efficiency of the buildings. And so it's more like focused on the in-house reduction of their CO2 emissions. And the second type then of initiatives, and this is really what 30-30-30 is related to, is to help companies in transitioning to new, more sustainable business models. And that's the work that we intend to do with 30-30-30, is to really make different types of companies come together to develop the new business models, to test them and deploy them within the Brussels region and beyond the Brussels region afterwards, if possible. And maybe to give a concrete idea of how we do this, there's this one project that we launched, which is an interesting one because it shows quite a few things that are interesting to take into account. On the political level, but also on the level of where the private sector really takes the leading role, and that is the project of Electric Avenue, which is the objective of the project is to deploy 300 EV charging stations along the Avenue Louise. So for those, I think a lot of people in this meeting know Brussels, I guess, and so the Avenue Louise is really interesting because it's a particular axis, because it's a good mix of both residential and tertiary buildings, both bigger companies and SMEs, and so the charging needs of the employees and the residents are quite complementary to each other, and that allows also to mutualize the needs and to optimize energy efficiency in that area for this. But it's interesting. I would say Electric Avenue is interesting in the sense that it was a sort of, we all know that the electrification of the fleet is a sort of like chicken or egg problem, especially in Brussels, I would say. I don't know how it is in other cities, of course, but until now there was a lack of clear strategy coming from the regional level, from the political level, until recently. And so we were lagging behind in terms of infrastructure, and that's where, as I said, the private sector really took the lead. So the EV charging stations are going to be installed in the properties of real estate owners, whether they're big companies or smaller companies, and so they're really going to respond to to a need, to a direct need of the employees, because it's responding to a legislative need. So that's one of the projects that we are working on, also closely together with the political level. Another example where we really try to involve SMEs as much as we can is a project where we are currently trying to develop a tool to accompany co-owners and syndics. I don't know if that's a word, but I think so, syndics, in the replacement of their boilers in residential, of course, residential buildings. And that's one of the projects that we develop using slow design sprint methods. And there's still remain a few important stumbling blocks, such as, for example, this financial model, and how can we actually convince syndics that it is important to make this energy transition. Yes. So that's just a few of the projects that we're working on.